Candy can cause injuries, and cravings for candy can sometimes be even more dangerous. But a piece of candy left at the scene can save a life. Chapter 1. Chung Ling was about to quit her job that afternoon when the disappearance suddenly had a breakthrough. At first, it was just a regular missing woman case, usually investigated by the police station or the local police. During the initial investigation, the police received anonymous information about a suspicious address. When they arrived, they found dried blood, and the case was transferred to the criminal investigation team. Chung Ling was responsible for the initial inspection of the scene. As her colleagues rushed to the place where the blood was found, she slowed down and turned to the wall surrounding the area. On the wall was a small shop. There was a faint trace in the corner of the wall below. What was it? She put on gloves and bent down to check. In that corner was a piece of candy. The candy was crushed. The originally bright color had now faded, leaving only faint specks of color. Chung Ling searched around, only to find this one candy. How strange. Why was there a candy at the crime scene? If it was just trash thrown around, why was there nothing else around but only this candy? Could it be it was intentionally placed here? If you don't pay attention, it's easy to miss. But the location of this candy, is there any special meaning? Chung Ling continued to observe. At this moment, the deputy captain shouted loudly, "Cheng Ling, what are you doing? Standing there looking at the trash for a while? This is useless. Come here quickly." The deputy captain's impatient voice made people feel uncomfortable. The surrounding walls also needed to be checked, but all the colleagues were focused on the area with the bloodstains. No one cared about the walls or other small details. The deputy captain arranged everything in order, but often overlooked small details. Trin Lin sighed. She was used to this. No matter what she did, they always found a way to criticize her. As a female police officer in a criminal investigation team, she had to go through many hardships and accept being scrutinized. Most of her female police officers were often transferred to office positions or jobs related to dispute resolution, protecting women and children, jobs that they considered suitable for women. Everyone said, "Field work is too dangerous, women should not participate." These prejudices caused female police officers to be increasingly marginalized. Trin Lin was the only female police officer in the criminal investigation team. To stand firm in the team, she had to work twice as hard to achieve the same position as her male colleagues. In response to the deputy captain's complaint, she was about to reply perfunctorily when she suddenly noticed a surveillance camera.
It was placed in a very clever corner, hidden by the leaves. But if she took a step back or took a step forward from this position, she wouldn't be able to see it. Chung Ling bent down to pick up the candy again. "There's a surveillance camera here." "What nonsense are you talking about?" The deputy captain stepped forward, pushed everyone aside, checked, and then flicked a few leaves away to confirm. "Oh, it's true." He laughed and patted her shoulder. "Well, your luck isn't bad, you're really a blind cat catching fried fish." The strong smell of cigarette smoke made Chung Ling step back, keeping her distance. The deputy captain scratched his head in embarrassment. "But why are you still holding that trash?" Chung Ling carefully put the candy into the evidence bag, calmly replying, "This trash helps us detect surveillance cameras." Another colleague checked the surrounding area. Seeing the bag of candy, he asked curiously, "Chung Ling, where did you pick it up?" She marked the collection location and replied, "In the corner of the wall. Not sure if it's related to the case, but there might be some fabric or traces. I'll send it for testing." The colleague shrugged, "Oh, handle it yourself. I'm very busy, I still have to go back to fix the broken lock of the motel door. This area is really gloomy, like a haunted area. There's even a shabby shop like that." He looked up, looked closely, and was startled. "What's this? Are there really cameras there? Did the shop install them?" Chung Ling immediately replied, "Ask the shop owner and you'll know. This area is very old. There was nothing before, it's about to be cleared out. Recently, the warehouse was robbed, we were scared so we installed surveillance cameras." The shop owner laughed heartily. A colleague whispered, "There's nothing special about this area." Chung Ling gestured, "It's okay, I'll bother you to extract the video." Who knows? In this era, having a camera is already a blessing. They fast-forwarded the video and found that the shop owner was right. The camera only captured a small part and didn't see anything special. The shop owner complained, "To be honest, since the camera was installed, no one has stolen any more. We've kept it so secret that sometimes we even forget. But anyway, it's best to install it, to save trouble." On the screen, each frame passed by, the scenery didn't change at all, just a series of monotonous colors. Suddenly, a figure flashed across the screen. Qingling quickly told her colleague to stop and rewind the video. The camera had indeed captured the image of a person. First, a pair of old canvas shoes appeared. The deputy team leader commented, "It looks like a woman." This person was wearing a long dress, walking quickly through the camera recording area. It seemed like she was heading towards the store, but her face was covered, only her figure could be seen, it was unclear who she was. Trin Lin asked, "Can this image be enlarged?" The colleague tried for a while and then shook his head, "Okay, but the equipment here is quite primitive, the image will be very blurry." They had no choice but to stare at the blurry image on the screen. "Boss, do you recognize this person? Your shop usually doesn't have many customers, you should remember?" The boss pushed his glasses, frowning, "It looks familiar." Before the boss could remember, footsteps echoed. When they pulled the door open, a delicate face appeared before their eyes. It was indeed a girl. "Ah." The boss clapped his hands loudly, as if suddenly remembering, "That's right, it's her. This girl is very good, this area used to be robbed a lot, she was the one who suggested I install a camera, and even showed me the effective installation location, to avoid more robberies." When mentioning the girl, the boss seemed to have turned on the transmitter, constantly praising her, saying that she was very enthusiastic and often helped people around. The group looked at each other with suspicion. She suggested installing the camera, and chose the right location and gave specific instructions. But if she were a thief, she should have tried to stay away from the camera's range. Or was it just a coincidence? Qingling frowned slightly and whispered, "Was it intentional?" The deputy captain shook his head, "We can't rule out this possibility for now." If it was intentional, then what was her purpose? Putting herself in the spotlight to attract the police's attention? Qingling continued to expand her reasoning. When she picked up the candy, she stood right where the camera was pointing. Could it be that she intentionally picked up the candy so that we could easily detect it? It was indeed a coincidence. If she had taken a step back or a step forward, there was a high chance that the camera would have missed it. Hearing this, the boss quickly interjected, "Police, don't misunderstand. This girl is very good, everyone likes her. Don't wrongly accuse her." A colleague laughed, "All right, Qingling, maybe you're thinking too far. We have to work based on evidence, don't make up stories." The deputy captain said nothing, just rubbed his chin and thought. Qingling, on the contrary, kept a serious expression, her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes glued to the screen. Something was wrong. That girl was wearing a shoulder bag. Is it the L symbol? Qingling took out her phone and compared a few photos from the previous missing persons file. One of the missing victims also used a bag with a similar L symbol. She enlarged the screen to compare it with the image in the camera. Although it was blurry, the symbol on the bag still matched. The colleague exclaimed, "That's right, it's really similar." The deputy captain immediately decided to go and ask that girl. Qingling said, "I want to go with you." A colleague stopped her, "Hey, Qingling, you have to get approval first for everything you do. Don't act on your own." Qingling bit her lip, remembering the reason why she was always oppressed in the team. The policewoman had reported being sexually harassed, but due to lack of evidence, the case ended without anyone taking responsibility. She was transferred to another job, while the accused was still at large and continued working. At a celebration party, that person even sarcastically said, "Women are really too sensitive. Just saying a few words and making a big deal out of it, making the whole team unhappy." "Qingling, you're not like that, are you?" He patted Qingling's shoulder, exhaling the smell of alcohol from his mouth. "Don't make a big deal out of it, okay?" Ling immediately moved away, coldly saying, "I'm drunk." The whole table laughed heartily, but those laughs were full of sarcasm. Today, when she was hindered by her colleagues, the feeling of helplessness arose again. But she told herself, she had to be patient, she definitely had to be patient. After finishing this case, she would leave the place she once thought was ideal for her to contribute to. At a coffee shop near L School, Ling's deputy captain and colleagues tried to smile friendly, but with the rough appearance of the police, their smiles looked a bit scary. They advised Ling to smile too. "We have to leave a good impression, make the girl feel confident." "Don't be so cold, what if you scare her?" Ling replied. "Actually, it's better if you guys don't smile." "Hey! Don't say that." They held their police badges, went through the inspection procedure, facing the girl. The deputy captain's colleagues still tried to keep a stiff smile, introducing themselves. The girl didn't show any surprise, just nodded slightly, showing their willingness to cooperate. Ling glanced at her, suddenly stunned. The girl was thin, her skin rough and dry. Her eyes were big but sunken, her pupils were jet black, so sharp that it made the person opposite feel like they were being penetrated by her gaze. When she looked intently, her eyes were like someone who had lost their breath, strangely empty. That look made Lin feel uncomfortable. Lin shook her head, reassuring herself. Meanwhile, the deputy team leader had finished asking the basic questions. Because the information about the case had not been made public, and the identity of the informant could not be revealed, they could only ask questions like, "Do you know the owner of that store? Do you know the origin of the camera system?" The girl answered each question, her voice soft, carrying a hint of fear. After completing the Q&A round, they planned to end the conversation. But Ling suddenly spoke up, "Thank you for your cooperation." "Oh, do you know anything about the recent missing person in the L area?" The girl hesitated, her eyes suddenly becoming moist. She raised her hand to her neck, gently stroking the necklace, which had a small flower on it. "I know. Her name is Jia. She is my best friend. This necklace is a gift from her." The coincidence was suspicious. Ling narrowed her eyes, feeling that this plot was unbelievable. Jia and this girl used to be close friends, and this girl often appeared near the missing area. She had once advised the store owner to install a camera in a hidden location. After Jia went missing, a few days later, this girl appeared on the surveillance camera again. Ling continued to ask, "Do you know anything about Jia's disappearance? Did the two of you ever have an argument or anything?" The girl lowered her head, tears falling drop by drop. Her hands tightened the necklace, her voice trembling, "No. I just hope she's safe." The colleague quickly handed over a tissue, changing the subject to ease the atmosphere. "This girl, is your necklace a chrysanthemum? It looks so beautiful." The girl nodded slightly, her hand still tightly gripping the necklace. "It's a fishtail chrysanthemum." After leaving, the deputy team leader sighed, "Ling, why are you in such a hurry? You scared the little girl to tears. As a girl, why don't you know how to sympathize with each other?" Ling didn't answer, only saying, "Her problem, there are still many things that need to be investigated. Do you guys pay attention to anything?" The colleague shook his head, indifferently saying, "Pay attention to what? What can such a small girl do? By the way, there's new information. Jia once had a conflict with a male student, and there was even a fight." "Which male student?" "Ah. Changqi, he also studies at L School. Brother Lu just went to ask and found out that he has been missing for more than half a month. His family also has no clue about his whereabouts." The deputy team leader hurriedly asked, "Where is he? Does he have a registered address? We need to investigate the area further." Returning to the cafe, Ling observed the girl from afar. The waiter brought out the cake, and the girl thanked him gently. But as soon as the waiter left, she suddenly used a plastic spoon to stab the cake. The action was repeated over and over, as if she was venting her anger. The red velvet cake was destroyed, and pieces of it flew around. She used her finger to wipe the crumbs, as if she was touching real blood. Her lips curled up slightly, smiling strangely. That scene made Ling feel a chill down her spine. Ling wondered, was Jia really her best friend? This girl, despite her appearance of fear and weakness, seemed to be hiding something deep inside. In a small alley, Lin quietly followed the girl. When she reached the end of the alley, the girl suddenly turned around and smiled. You've been following me for so long, aren't you going to say hello? Lin frowned, feeling like she had been discovered from the beginning. Are you and Jia really close friends? The girl smiled, looking innocent, of course. I told you everything, right? What about Thuong Chi? Just a classmate. The answer was quick, without any hesitation. But that made Lin even more suspicious. Lin took a deep breath, looking at the girl with a cold gaze. Do you think you've hidden it perfectly? The scene was so clean that there were no traces, but why did you leave a little blood? Lin looked at the girl, her eyes sharp, her lips curled into a smile. That's a story, right? She took a candy out of her pocket and threw it over. Want to try it? Maybe this will be a familiar taste? The girl did not show any reaction, calmly took the candy, then gently stroked it, making a delicate sound. Is that right? Or is it still not right? Ling probed, step by step. The girl raised her head, the corner of her mouth curled up into a gentle smile, but her eyes were as cold as ice. Officer Ching, I am no longer a child who likes these cheap candies. As she spoke, she threw the candy back hard, as if wanting to end the conversation. In the past, that cheap candy was the only thing I could hold in my hand. So I kept it like a treasure, buried it deep in the ground, hoping it could stay with me forever. Ling curled her lips, but anything buried in the ground will decompose. If it encounters a humid environment, the process will be even faster. If you want to preserve it for a long time, you should have put it in a sealed bag and added a desiccant. The girl chuckled, her smile not showing any hurt or anger, just pure mockery. It's okay, Officer Ching. I have better things now. If there's nothing else, I have to go, graduation is coming soon. Ling replied politely, thank you for your cooperation. But her heart was still tense, as if she was waiting for something. As the girl walked away, Ling suddenly remembered something and shouted, wait a minute. The girl didn't turn around, only tilted her head slightly. Ling asked loudly, that first candy, where did you bury it? The girl smiled mysteriously, continued walking, leaving behind a vague sentence, who knows? Ling stood there, clenched her fists, and whispered in the wind, in the end. What is the truth? Chapter 2. That girl's name is Tam Van, she has been motherless for a long time. It's not that her mother passed away, but she left after her father was diagnosed with a terminal illness, taking all the family's money with her. Her father was an honest, quiet farmer. Every day when he came home, he put all the money he earned in the drawer, never complaining. But then, one day, the drawer was empty. Her mother disappeared when she was only 8 years old. After that, everything changed. Her father started drinking and smoking. When he didn't have money to buy alcohol, he would borrow money. If he couldn't borrow money, he would get angry and beat her. At first, the neighbors intervened, advising him not to do that. But when he held the knife in his hand, he shouted, do you want to die? His fierce eyes, the knife raised higher and higher, made the neighbors quiet down, so they had to back away. She sat huddled in the corner of the house, sobbing. Other children had mothers who sewed small bags to carry snacks, but she had nothing. The louder she cried, the harder her father's fists fell. Gradually, she stopped crying. A child abandoned by her mother, why should she suffer more beatings for no reason? She had done nothing wrong, but had to bear it all. Her father had a terminal illness, but his time limit had not yet come. Every time he came home drunk, she was beaten. Of the two of them, at least one had to survive, he used to say. Every day, she was locked in the house with a broken lock, guarding what was left. She cooked rice, her father ate his fill, sometimes bringing home leftovers to eat with his wine. Waiting for him to fall asleep, she secretly rummaged through the trash cans to find leftover bones and rotten food to fill her hungry stomach. The constant hunger forced her to divide the trash she found into many small meals, eating little by little so as not to starve to death. Her body was thin and haggard, no longer able to resist. She was used to curling up in the corner of the wall, waiting for the beatings. Then she consoled herself, time was running out, sooner or later she would be freed. He had a terminal illness. Shouldn't she be happier? But why wasn't he dead yet? Every day was hell. She used to think, if that was the case, it would be better to end it. Why live in torment? There was a time when she didn't bother to rummage through the trash can anymore, just curled up in the corner of the wall, waiting for death to come closer. Every minute, every second passed. Hunger tormented her. Her survival instinct was stronger than reason. She dragged herself to the trash can, reached in to search. Still had to live. Even though she was in pain, she still wanted to live. Live until one day, she could save herself. She used to think, as long as she escaped this house, she would no longer be locked up. But she didn't expect that fate could change in just a moment. That day, her father came back drunk again, muttering curses, dirty and smelling of alcohol. He saw her huddled in the corner of the wall, so he grabbed the lock and threw it at her. The pain made her curl up, holding her wound, her mind buzzing. As usual, he raised the broom, but this time he didn't hit her. She closed her eyes tightly, silently praying that he would fall asleep soon. Not long after, she felt someone shaking her shoulder. "Hey! Are you okay? Hey!" She tried to open her eyes. The painful sounds gradually became clearer. A white-skinned boy stood in front of her, his eyes worried. One hand held her shoulder, the other gestured something to the people around. She tried to raise her head and realized that there were already many people standing in the room. The neighbors who had avoided her before now gathered together, seemingly talking to her father. 2 other boys stood beside her. They weren't from the village. "Why are they here?" One of the boys spoke up, "Father, Mother, this child is so pitiful. Please save him." The gentleman with a gentle appearance glanced at her, then nodded in agreement. Her palm clenched tightly, as if clinging to the last ray of hope. The boy did not mind her being dirty. Please save him. After a while, she was brought into a bright, clean room. The air was fresh, everything was very pleasant. They said, "You are in the hospital." They nodded to her, "You are safe." Everything turned out to be so easy. She was surrounded by police and doctors. The doctor reported the condition, and the police just nodded, occasionally looking at her with pity. Poor child. But there was no sign of the boy. They really saved her. But who were they? Her thoughts were very vague. The police said that it was Professor Thuong's family. A man with fame, power and prestige. A completely different world from her. They went there because Professor Thuong was too busy, once again missing the activity with his son at the summer camp. The boy cried and demanded compensation, insisting on coming to this area to play. Unexpectedly, they discovered her in a miserable state. The boy's name was Thuong Chi, the professor's only son. He had lived in luxury since childhood, but had a kind heart. Seeing a strange girl crying, he pulled his parents to help. They called the police, put her in the back seat and took her to the hospital. They were really good, unbelievably good. The police also said that during the days she was in a coma, her father collapsed due to irregular living hours and work pressure. The mother did not appear at all. So she became an orphan. Everyone looked at her with pity. But she could hardly contain her laughter. She felt liberated. She had finally waited for this day. The policewoman gently stroked her head and said softly, "Don't worry about the future. When you recover, we will send you to the welfare home, which has special support policies. Your life will be better in the future." She nodded in thanks and asked again, "Where is Professor Thuong?" "I haven't had time to thank them." "Oh, they're back." As for Thuong Chi, he said he really hopes you can live a better life in the future. If there's fate, maybe you two will meet again. She stared at the round candy. Clenching the candy in her palm, she felt the coolness. She was still alive. Even though her life was a series of days of digging through the trash for food, she still received a sweet candy. She began to looking forward to the day she would see Thuong Chi again. After that, everything passed by as fast as time. At the orphanage, she lived with other children. However, due to her stunted body and poor nutrition, she was often bullied by the boys, calling her freak or ugly. The girls avoided her, saying that she always smelled bad. No one wanted to get close to her. When the teachers tried to advise her, those children acted well. But behind her back, they continued to laugh at her. She had no friends, gradually became quiet, and withdrew into her own shell. In high school, she didn't make any friends either. She got used to being invisible, forgotten in group activities. However, she was still relieved, because at least water bottles weren't thrown or scribbled on her desk anymore. One day, in the girls' lively stories about a famous boy, the name Thuong Chi appeared again. Listening quietly, she realized that he studied at a prestigious school, always leading in academic performance, and was also very popular. The news made her heart filled with hope. Unexpectedly, they could meet again. She was not a simple person. She always tried. Just like she had tried to survive in the past, now she was trying to get closer to something. It was the college entrance exam. To meet him again, to thank him for his help in the past, and also to prove that she had not let down the goodness that the world had given her. Her academic results improved dramatically, as if she had escaped a vicious cycle. Teachers were surprised by that change, often looking at her in class, starting to ask questions, even complimenting her after class. The friends around her also gradually changed their attitudes. Those who used to be indifferent now chattered and asked questions, even wanting to learn study secrets from her. She accepted the compliments comfortably, but deep down, she still couldn't get used to this change. She was constantly afraid. Because she had suffered from being ignored and forgotten, she understood that fear more deeply than anyone else. This enthusiasm was fake. She withdrew, found a hidden corner, tried to become invisible again, like the old days. But everything was no longer the same. She became the center of attention, with no place to hide. The people around her laughed and talked, pretending to be close, but how much of it was really sincere? Finally, her efforts paid off. She got into her dream school. Standing in front of the bulletin board, she saw her name and his name in the same class. She breathed a sigh of relief, adjusted her shirt, and tried to calm down. She was about to see him again. Did he still remember her? Did he remember the candy he had given her? She nervously walked into the classroom, her eyes searching. And then, she saw him. But he was no longer the same as she remembered. He sat there, looking arrogant and cold. When she timidly approached, he looked up with a cold gaze. "Oh, are you done yet? You're talking too loudly." Those words, that attitude, were completely different from the image she had once engraved. As if struck by shock, she stepped back, stuttering, wanting to say something to thank you, wanting to find some of the warmth of the past. But he just turned away indifferently, his words falling into the void. He trampled on all her expectations, crushing every little bit of hope that remained. So annoying. She stood there, like a stone statue. After class, she returned to her seat, absent-minded. She realized that what she expected were all things she had created in her own mind. Those thoughts kept bothering her. Is it really good to continue living? Is what I'm trying to achieve really worth it? If all my hopes are gone in the end, what will I have left? Later, the girl learned that the change in Thuong Chi's personality was related to a family incident. Their first meeting turned out to be the last time they could consider each other as friends. Thuong Chi's father had put all his heart and soul into preparing for a grand concert to make up for his mother. But during that time, he revealed that he had an affair. To make up for it, he only knew how to blindly pamper his son, in order to hide the damage he caused. When Thuong Chi's mother found out, she could not bear the shock and immediately rushed into a legal battle for divorce. His father was no pushover either, using every trick to win. The two quickly entered a new life, each building their own family, leaving Thuong Chi alone between the two sides. From then on, he became arrogant and haughty, causing trouble everywhere, because he knew that his teachers could not contact his parents to ask for intervention. If the teachers tried to call, they would only receive a cold reply, "Oh, really?" Chapter 3. One day, when Trin Lin had just returned to the police station, the phone rang. The colleague on the other end of the line rang, "Sister Trin. Are you still following this case closely? Is there any new progress?" Qing Ling replied, "I have some speculations, but I need more time to confirm." As soon as she finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps rang out from the hallway. A group of colleagues rushed over, not having time to explain, only saying urgently, "Qing Ling, you came back at the right time, follow us now." Qing Ling was dragged away by her teammates in confusion, hastily running a long distance before taking the opportunity to ask, "What happened?" A colleague close to her immediately took out a stack of documents from her bag, panting as he handed them to her. "Lin sister, take a look." Seeing her colleague's serious expression, Qing Ling did not dare to laugh anymore, took the documents and began to examine them. The handwriting on the documents was a bit scribbled, clearly hastily written, but was still clear enough to read. Accordingly, thanks to an anonymous source, the team tracked down a place suspected to be Chang Ji's hiding place. When they arrived, the scene before their eyes was horrifying. The room was messy, the furniture was in disarray, and there were traces of self-harm everywhere. Huang Qi was emaciated, his hair was disheveled, and he looked haggard. He kept torturing himself, his hands and feet were full of cuts, and his body was covered with bruises. He cried and laughed, repeating an unclear sentence, "He hasn't given me medicine for a long time." When the police asked what medicine, who it was related to, he did not answer at all, just stared blankly at the floor and kept whispering, "He is the best. He is the best." Huang Qi was immediately taken to a mental hospital for treatment and observation. The doctor said that, in addition to severe psychological trauma, he also showed signs of long-term drug abuse, causing serious damage to his body. The strange thing is, these injuries are not likely to recover. Qing Ling held the document, his eyes were thoughtful, and he commented, "There is definitely a connection. This is our main suspect." His colleague retorted, "But we don't have any concrete evidence to charge him. If we're not careful, he might run away." Qing Ling replied firmly, "No." "Why do you believe that?" "He is the key. We just need to investigate his relationships and we'll find the truth." During the interrogation, Chang Ji did not show any resistance or lie. But no matter what the investigation team asked, he remained silent, only occasionally raising his lips in a sarcastic smile. Once, he even yawned defiantly, then raised his eyebrows and looked straight at the person being interrogated. A colleague couldn't control his anger and slammed the table, but he still didn't show any signs of wavering. In the end, the team leader shrugged, "We don't have any solid evidence, so we have to let him go." As she left the interrogation room, Qing Ling looked at the clock on the wall. She felt helpless in the face of reality, as if an important thread had been broken. The deputy captain placed his hand on her shoulder to comfort her. "We will continue to investigate. Don't be too stressed." Trin Lin nodded, but her heart was heavy. "He is like a string that ties all the clues together. We need to follow each of his relationships, from recent times to the past." The deputy captain wanted to say something, but hesitated for a long time, and finally said, "Lin, I think we need to talk privately." In a hidden corner, the deputy captain slowly spoke, "Lin, you are a good person, but you also need to consider carefully when pursuing difficult cases like this. We need to protect you. Women should not be under too much pressure, right?" Trin Lin heard and felt a surge of frustration in her heart. This was a serious case, involving unsolved mysteries. But instead of focusing on the direction of the investigation, the deputy captain indulged in outdated gender stereotypes. She took a deep breath, trying to suppress her annoyance. "Thank you for your kindness, but I think we should get back to work. There's still a lot to do." Qing Ling was dragged away by her teammates, her heart filled with confusion. A feeling of anger for no reason flared up in her chest. What was the deputy captain going to say? Tell her to stop this case and arrange a lighter job? She thought to herself, is he crazy? Without holding back, she replied bluntly, "What are you talking about? Afraid of getting hurt? Resting? I'm not afraid of hardship. If there's been any wrongdoing in the past, just say it directly, don't beat around the bush." but have I ever been fairly evaluated? The deputy captain frowned, his expression as if blaming her for not knowing what to do. Everyone doesn't want you to take risks. You're a girl, how can you be on duty all night or chase criminals? If you're having menstrual cramps and can't stand, how can you run? Are you asking criminals to stop and wait for you? You should realize your limits, stop being stubborn. Hearing this, Qingling laughed sarcastically, her eyes filled with contempt. Why am I the only one being suspected? Our male colleagues have never made a mistake? Don't tell me they've never been criticized on the bulletin board. Why are they accepted, but I'm not? Is it because I'm not good enough, or is it because I'm a woman that you guys don't dare to trust me? The deputy captain was embarrassed, his lips moved, but he couldn't refute. What did I do wrong? Or is it just because I'm not a man? After a moment of silence, the vice captain lowered his voice. Trin, don't push things to extremes. If you want people to recognize you, you have to be a role model, standing at the highest position. If you can't do it, consider withdrawing to find a more suitable path. Otherwise, when you fail, you'll only make things difficult for yourself. The sentence stunned Trin Lin. Was this advice or a secret request for her to resign? But before she could react, the vice captain suddenly walked closer, patted her on the shoulder and said, looking very serious, however, you did very well this time. I sincerely apologize if my previous words hurt you. Trin Lin was bewildered. Was the vice captain serious? Or was he possessed? The deputy captain continued, no one is against you. As long as you work hard and prove your abilities, even doing better than your male colleagues, we have no reason to look down on you. We are all serving the country, serving the people. Do you understand what I mean? Trin Lin did not answer immediately, but thought quietly. What was the reason she wanted to give up this job? Too desperate. No matter how hard she tried, she still felt like nothing could change. But now, perhaps she had realized one thing, even if it is a small power, it is still valuable. That was the reason for her to continue. Even if there was a faint hope, she would not give up. Trin Lin stood still, her heart full of contradictions. Persisting for change or persevering for hope? Will the things she was certain of before really change? Clearly, the deputy captain's words today broke the inherent prejudice. The change had come silently, it was just that the information had not been communicated or was intentionally hidden, making her unable to realize it. The deputy captain looked at her, his voice low. Think carefully, when the case is over, give me a definitive answer. Trin Lin nodded, said nothing, turned around and left. As she walked away, the deputy captain suddenly spoke up, actually, sometimes I feel regretful. The organization always encourages women to shoulder half of the sky. Your generation has much more energy and determination than us. Keep up the good work. Trin Lin's footsteps paused for a moment, but she did not turn around, nor did she respond. She just kept walking, like many times before. Chapter 4. On the other side, Thuong Chi's memories were shattered. He tried to piece together the scattered pieces, hoping to fill the void in his heart. No one he dared to trust, no one he dared to rely on. He was both yearning and afraid. Thuong Chi recalled his darkest days. At that time, in the midst of despair, someone gave him a piece of candy. Even though he was now in a dangerous situation, he still wished for someone to accompany him. That person became his only spiritual support. Even though he was humiliated and trampled, he still did not give up. He cried in his heart, but always hugged that person tightly. Thuong Chi's spirit gradually collapsed, and he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. When that person came, he was always both happy and afraid. At first, he raised everything up to throw. Then, gradually, he gave him the house key. Every time that person gave him medicine, he quickly drank it without asking any questions. But in the end, the house was still empty, with no one else but his lonely figure. Then that person began to change. That person gradually became a source of light, but also a burden. One day, Thuong Chi could not bear it anymore. He looked into that person's eyes and asked, in your memory, what kind of person am I? Like now? If so, are you still willing to stay by my side? That person answered briefly, I am willing. Huangqi burst into tears. For the first time, he let go of all the resentment in his heart and gently hugged that person. From that moment, everything began to change. But he did not expect that the happy day would not last long. Because of a new person, Jia appeared. She transferred to the next class, bringing with her a dazzling light that made everything around her fade away. Huangqi felt moved for the first time, and he could not stop thinking about her. He learned everything about Jia. She was a model student, obedient, excellent in academics. Jia was everything he wished for but could not reach. From then on, Huangqi began to change. He focused on studying, determined to enter the same university as Jia. However, every time he saw Jia's contemptuous eyes, his heart felt like someone was squeezing it. Then one day, Jia started talking to him. I remember you helped me before. Can you help me again? For the first time, Huangqi felt hope. But was that really salvation, or just the beginning of a deeper wound? It was ridiculous. Everything changed. Huangqi fell because of his family, but tried hard because of Jia. If it weren't for Jia, maybe next time he would continue to slide down for another reason. Change is not permanent, because expectations of good things often quickly rot. There is no way to save them. Standing in the present looking back, it's all so ironic. Expectation is not hope, but the best excuse to justify coercion. But he never realized it. Compared to Jia, Huangqi is just a person hiding in the dark, knowing about the light, but never touching it. Jia grew up in a wealthy family, not lacking in love. But her parents were too busy, not having time to be with them. She lived in abundance, loved by everyone like a princess. But her heart was empty, always feeling that something was missing. Since childhood, Jia loved to play puzzles. She always believed that as long as she put together enough pieces, her parents would suddenly appear. But the number of pieces was always wrong, her hopes were constantly broken. Gradually, Jia got used to loneliness. Even though she was always surrounded by friends later on, thanks to her beautiful appearance and gentle personality, she still kept her distance from everyone. Only when he was with Huangqi did Jia feel comfortable. However, their relationship was so strange that it could not be defined. Jia liked to help Huangqi, perhaps because his misfortune made her feel better. Huangqi, on the contrary, always felt that he was unworthy. He told himself, I am just an incompetent person, not worthy of Jia's goodness. Once, Jia asked, you always talk about the past, but why do you always tell it in such a pitiful way? Huangqi was silent for a long time, then gently replied, because I can only get people to pay attention to me that way. Jia smiled, but there was a bit of sadness in his eyes. Actually, you don't need to do that. I think you are very strong. From then on, Jia became the only driving force to help Huangqi escape from the darkness, but from then on, he realized that Jia's light was too bright, making him unable to get close without being burned. Every time they met, Huangqi asked himself, do I have enough courage to move forward? Jia, with his gentle smile, never realized the conflict in his heart. But the truth is, no matter how beautiful that light was, Huangqi knew it did not belong to him. Jia, no matter what, could not bear the dirt. Huangqi vaguely realized that Jia's presence, tolerance, and kindness were all fake. Every time Huangqi showed himself to be weak, pitiful, and harmless, Jia always reached out to help. Because Jia was inherently a good person. But when the shell was peeled off, when the dirty truths were exposed, Jia would be like wiping off the icing on a cake, without any regret, removing everything. Huangqi felt like Jia had pushed her out of her world. The disgust in Jia's eyes was too obvious. Then, becoming another Huangqi, a better Huangqi, would probably be better. No more helping, no more expecting anything in return. Just staying by her side forever. He vaguely realized that Jia had never been sincere. Good memories could not be kept forever, because they had changed. Huangqi changed, Jia also changed. The past could not be returned. The best way was to not let change happen. If he could keep Jia by his side, keep the best moments, maybe things would be different. The past was like a double-edged sword. It could be a source of motivation, but it could also be something that dragged Thuangchi down to the bottom. If he could not keep the good things, Thuangchi would rather have nothing at all. Chapter 5 Police Trinlin decided to start investigating from the past. Some of her colleagues were assigned to go to the place where Jia used to study to collect information, trying to reconstruct the relationship between Jia, Thuangchi, and another person who often appeared in the stories. Meanwhile, another group continued to monitor places such as schools, churches, and libraries, but still found nothing unusual. During the questioning, Trinlin's colleagues discovered something very strange. Jia and Thuangchi used to study at the same school, even in the same club. But the relationship between the two was ambiguous. A classmate of Thuangchi said, "Jia? She knows Thuangchi. Thuangchi is a bit strange, like she's clinging to Jia. Jia is always gentle, but also keeps her distance." Later, Thuangchi changed, the two of them seemed to no longer talk to each other. Jia's roommate said, "Jia is a very careful person, but the way she treats Thuangchi is a bit strange. They are very close, but I don't think they are normal friends. Maybe Jia feels sorry for Thuangchi, so she helps her." A staff member at the coffee shop that Jia and Thuangchi often go to said, "They are like a couple. Jia is always smiling, Thuangchi is very attentive to her. But the third person, the one who always sits with them, doesn't say much, just sits there, looking at them." When he returned to the team, the vice captain called everyone to discuss. According to the information we have gathered, Chang-Chi was once diagnosed with bipolar disorder. There are some people who have been secretly taking care of him, but recently, they have all pretended not to know him. Qingling recalled Chang-Chi's classmate's story and her crazy eyes. Another colleague spoke up, "So is it because Jia rejected Chang-Chi, then became close to that third person, that led to the murder?" Qingling raised her head and said, "According to what Jia's roommate said, Jia and that friend's relationship wasn't really that good." The vice captain pondered, perhaps it was because of their close relationship that led to the conflict with Jia? Another colleague continued, "What about Chang-Chi? If Jia and her knew each other, would Chang-Chi have discovered anything? If he had discovered it, why didn't he stop it?" The conference room fell silent. The complicated relationship between the three people made the whole team confused. The vice captain was the first to break the silence, asking, "Qingling, do you have any comments?" Qingling replied, "This relationship is more complicated than we thought. It's possible that we haven't realized the deeper meaning of their connection. But right now, we can only follow the surface clues." The vice captain nodded and sighed, "Then let's continue digging from the surface." Another colleague still wondered, "But, are we all leaning towards the hypothesis that Jia was murdered? She was so weak." Qingling replied, "I'm leaning towards the possibility that Xinyun was the mastermind." The deputy captain looked at the board and emphasized, "Then what about the other two? If that's really the case, why didn't they do anything to stop or warn?" The whole team began to argue, maybe the murderer is Changji. After the murder, the mental shock caused him to fall into a state of confusion. What role did Xinyun play? Don't forget that she also provoked us. What if she was manipulating to distract us? Or is Changji too obsessed with Jia, wanting to possess Jia, causing conflict, leading to the murder? Wait. Why do we assume that Jia is dead? There is no concrete evidence, and no obvious bloodstains. What if she is not dead, but just injured? While everyone was arguing, Trin Lin still remembered the girl's strange eyes and ambiguous smile in the alley. "Don't worry, Officer Trin. I have another kind of candy, better, more perfect." "That kind of candy, is it really just candy? Or is it something else?" Based on some vague clues, Qingling made a hypothesis and reported to the team. "Through the investigation, I discovered that Xinyun had taken a leave of absence for a while. According to the information we have, she might have returned to her old place. She doesn't have a home, nor any relatives. What did she do back there? I don't think this was a spontaneous action. The candy she mentioned might be a reference to Jia. If that's the case, she might have prepared in advance and even have experience in handling corpses. I suggest checking that area." The deputy captain frowned, "This idea is risky. Are you sure it's worth us spending resources on? Qinglin resolutely nodded. I believe that we should not ignore any clues. This could be our breakthrough. Some colleagues disagreed. Qinglin, you are gambling. The data is too vague, there is no certainty. We have exhausted our resources, why waste more on such a hypothesis? Qinglin firmly defended her point of view, continuing to persuade. Finally, the deputy captain sighed and agreed, okay, let's do it. But remember to prepare thoroughly. We need to coordinate closely with the local police to ensure safety and efficiency. If nothing is obtained, you will be held responsible. Qinglin bowed her head and accepted the task without hesitation. Chapter 6. Xinyun never felt understood. Like a pitiful lamb, she was always waiting for salvation. But the Savior had no mercy on her. The candy she kept was not meant to be shared. The first candy, when she received it, she considered it the most precious treasure. She hid it carefully, afraid that if she lost it, she would never have the chance to get a second one. The second candy, she dug it up herself, but that was when she realized it was rotten, slimy, making her nauseous. The pills, the candies she received from the doctor, could not heal her soul. They only made her sink deeper into a state of false euphoria, then fall back into the abyss of pain. She cut her wrists to find release, but still held on to the memory, sobbing, wondering if things would ever be the same again. She kept doing this, repeating herself over and over again in her own vicious cycle. I need to change the medicine and try it. Miraculously, it only took 2 pills and a little time to accumulate. Just a few days, everything seemed to return to the beginning. That's why she hated change. If possible, she just hoped the world would stop forever at the most beautiful moment. The moment Thuangqi had only her. But the truth was not like that. Jia appeared. Disrupted everything. And she had to do something. Becoming friends with Jia was not an easy task. She took the time to observe first. If she approached directly, Jia would definitely be on guard. Therefore, she chose a slow approach, arousing Jia's curiosity. She deliberately walked around the dormitory, then bought a carton of milk and a sausage. She tore the food into small pieces, put it in a plastic box, and brought it to the lame cat in the nearby alley. Jia saw it, his eyes full of sympathy. She sighed, then smiled. Just arrange a few accidental collisions, to get Jia's attention, and gradually build up the image of a quiet girl. Jia began to notice her, but still kept her distance. Tamqi was always ready to retreat, pretending to have nothing to do with her if there was any sign that Jia said something to someone else. Every misunderstanding only made her more innocent and pitiful. However, it was a pity that the play had to end before it could be fully performed. But that didn't matter. She buried another candy deep. It was wonderful. She didn't need to worry about whether there were any left. In the box, there were now 2 candies. Chapter 7. When they arrived at the remote suburbs, the surrounding scenery was completely deserted. The sky was gloomy, the dark clouds were heavy, seemingly pressing down on the entire space. Qinglin followed the local policeman, slowly walking through the muddy road. The space was filled with a musty and fishy smell. The policeman covered his nose as he walked. This house has been abandoned for a long time, it must be full of rats or animal carcasses inside. It's hard to bear the smell. Qinglin nodded, enduring and not saying anything. When they arrived in front of the abandoned house, the scene was even more dilapidated. The tiled roof was almost completely collapsed, the walls were covered with moss and mold, the windows were rotten, only the frames remained. The ground was flooded, the mud made it even more difficult to move. In the yard, Qinglin carefully observed every corner. Suddenly, she noticed a corner of the yard with a different soil color. Wearing rubber gloves, she bent down and gently turned over the top layer of soil. It was obvious that this area had been dug up recently. Taking out the digging tool from her bag, she continued working. The deeper she dug, the stronger the stench became. Not long after, Qinglin touched a hard object that made a deep sound. It was a rotten gift box. She carefully lifted it up. The bottom of the box was severely corroded, and with just a little force, the moldy patches would fall off. When she opened the lid, the stench of decay was so suffocating that both Qingling and the police officer had to hold their breath. Inside were decomposing body parts, flesh peeling off to reveal some bones, and insects crawling everywhere. Both of them had to suppress their nausea. The police officer trembled and asked, "What's inside?" "It seems like there's something else." Qingling suppressed her disgust and continued to check. Among the pile of corpses was a transparent plastic bag, inside of which was an intact candy, untouched. Even with her expertise, Qingling could easily recognize the perfect fingerprint on the plastic bag. Whose fingerprint was that? Was it a provocation from the murderer? Or was it a hidden message? Qingling gasped and quickly instructed, "Contact the forensics immediately. Secure the scene." She took out her phone, recorded the scene, and described the state of the evidence in detail. When the forensics team arrived, they carefully handled the body, placed it in a specialized evidence bag, and sealed it tightly. The candy, now, was not just a mystery, but could be the key to solving the case. Chapter 8. After collecting all the evidence, the forensic team carefully placed the evidence bags into a specialized transport container, clearly marking the origin and location of each piece of evidence. All evidence has been safely preserved. We will immediately transfer it to the police team's forensic laboratory for further analysis. The forensic team leader reported to Qingling. She nodded, checked each record again, confirming that there were no errors, before returning to the police station with them. During the transport, she accompanied them to supervise, ensuring that the evidence was not disturbed. At the forensic room, the staff received the evidence and began preparing for the DNA analysis. Qingling once again checked the list, making sure that all procedures were in accordance with the process. Due to the severe decomposition of the body, the test results could take up to a week to complete. However, it was speculated that both Xinyun and Chang Ji were involved. Did they conspire to kill each other? Qingling, after asking for permission from the deputy captain, went to Chang Chi again, trying to persuade him to confess. In a coffee shop, he sat silently, his hands clasped together, his shoulders drooping, looking both obedient and pitiful. "Officer Qing, your colleagues are hanging around like this, aren't they affecting my life?" But with the current evidence, the entire police team agreed that there was no need to drag things out any further. Qingling went straight to the point. "Tell me, what are you trying to hide? What are you planning?" He tilted his head, his eyes innocently looking at her, his voice dragging out, "Officer, I don't understand what you're talking about." "Of course, you have the right to remain silent. But let me remind you, all your actions are under our control. If you really committed a crime, it's still too late to confess now. You will receive leniency." When he heard this, a hint of mockery appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't reply, but Qingling sensed a hidden message. "So what?" Finally, he spoke, his tone both regretful and slightly mocking. "Police, why are you so aggressive? Sooner or later, everything will change. Even I can't avoid it." "What do you mean?" "Time passes, the world is constantly changing. Whether good or bad, we can't control it." Qingling frowned, trying to probe, "So you still stick to your intentions?" He shook his head, speaking as if giving up. "Rest assured, everything will come to an end. You will know the truth, and I have also gotten what I wanted." After he finished speaking, he gave a mysterious smile as if he was rewarding a child, then stood up and left. "See you again, Officer Qing. But, definitely not in my life again." Back at the station, her colleague was puzzled. "What nonsense is he talking about? Whether he confessed or not, tell me clearly." Qingling calmly replied, "It doesn't matter what he said. The forensic results will be the strongest evidence. We just need to wait." "That's right, go rest. It's been too stressful all day." But less than a day later, urgent news arrived. The suspect, Chang Ji, attempted suicide in the psychiatric ward. Due to his unstable mental state, the medical staff confiscated all his sharp objects. But after a few seconds of inattention, he banged his head against the wall, and blood flowed non-stop. He cried and banged his head, as if he was cornered. After being injected with sedatives, Chang Ji calmed down and asked to go to the bathroom. Seeing that there were no signs of abnormalities, the nurse untied his hands. However, after a long time, he did not return. When Qingling's colleague broke in, a horrifying scene appeared. Chang Ji was lying on the floor, blood mixed with water flowing everywhere. He used the glass from the bathroom mirror to slit his wrist. On his face, although pale from blood loss, there was still a strange smile. Qingling received the news, only remained silent for a few seconds, then ordered, "Contact his family, send the body to the preservation department. If after a few days, there is no news from relatives, arrange the funeral according to cremation procedures." The atmosphere in the police station was filled with a heavy feeling. No one said another word. Everyone just sat and waited. The clock on the wall ticked, counting down to the end. The fingerprint test results were back, and at the same time, it showed that confessing could help reduce the punishment. But could they patiently wait for the suspect to confess? Wait. Or let everything disappear into obscurity? Chapter 9. The police had been monitoring Xinyun for a long time, ever since the fingerprint examination results were completed. Not giving her a chance to move or destroy any important evidence, the investigation team kept a close watch. But surprisingly, since she moved to the new apartment, she had done almost nothing. Except for sending a job application to the newspaper office, she had not had any other suspicious actions. One evening, the deputy captain, along with a few colleagues, sat eating noodles in the surveillance car, still not taking their eyes off the building where she lived. What is she doing in there? A teammate wondered. The deputy captain smiled faintly, patting his teammate on the shoulder. Wait a little longer, it won't take long anyway. If necessary, we'll rush in. Near midnight, the girl's room was still dark, with no signs of activity. The deputy captain ordered, "Go ahead, there's nothing left to lose anyway. Just raid and check." He assigned some people to stay behind to defend, while the rest headed towards the apartment. They knocked loudly at the door, but no one answered. This time, they didn't wait any longer, and decided to break the door. A loud noise rang out, and the door swung open. But inside it was completely dark, without any sign of life. The room was empty, everything was eerily silent. The police slowly walked in, flashlights shining everywhere. There was nothing, no people, no suspicious objects, just an empty room with an eerie silence. The deputy captain frowned. Did we miss something? There was a long silence. Following the traces, they went to another room, but when they opened it, there was still nothing but darkness. Everyone felt that something was wrong. And then, from deep in the darkness, a small noise rang out, causing the entire team to hold their breath. The colleague frowned. What's the situation? Is there no one in there? Qingling groped along the wall, found the switch, and turned on the light. Light filled the room. Being a rented apartment, everything was very simple. The cupboard door was slightly open, inside were only a few basic personal hygiene items. Qingling touched the towel and faucet, muttering, "Still damp, probably used recently." However, the person definitely hasn't gone far yet. The colleague nodded. "It's okay, let's just block off this area. Even if we turn into a mosquito, we can't escape." Qingling's eyes stopped at the living room table. What's that? It was a stack of letters lying haphazardly on the table. She walked closer, and just as the colleague was about to reach out to take it, the deputy captain pushed his hand away. "What are you doing? Aren't you wearing gloves?" Colleague glanced at him, pouting. "I don't see anyone on my team wearing them either." An awkward silence. Everyone quickly took out their gloves from their pockets and carefully put on their protective gear. Colleagues who finished first picked up the letter and read it out loud. The letter began with the words, "To myself, thank you for bringing me here. To the current police officers, I know you crave the truth. It's a pity that, despite all the evidence, you can't completely convict me. I'm sorry, because I don't regret it, but that will make you regret it forever. The story begins a long, long time ago. I had no mother, no family. I didn't want to live anymore, but then one day I received a candy, hope flashed. The second letter read, "To the police officers, I assume you received the first letter, right? I have calculated very carefully. Have you investigated the reason why I asked for leave? I will tell you, when I was in college, I often stopped by the grocery store of an old man in town. After graduating, I left, but there was still a connection enough to arouse your suspicion. This is the last time I say this, you will never forget me." After 14 days of having chance meetings with Gia, the relationship between the two of us became closer. The two of us seemed to have become close friends, to the point of no longer being shy. I pretended to be a good friend who always tried to connect Gia and Thuan Chi, but every time I saw Thuan Chi trying for Gia, I hated her so much. At first, the relationship between Thuan Chi and Gia was quite favorable. Even the way Gia treated him was getting better and better. But deep down, Thuan Chi still couldn't escape the invisible fear. At first, my plan was very simple: increase the dose of the medicine to push Thuan Chi's mood to the limit. Then, create a few situations so that Thuan Chi would misunderstand that Gia also had feelings for me. Next, I would arrange for Thuan Chi to accidentally witness Gia with another man. Everything would be enough to make Thuan Chi completely collapse. My plan progressed as expected. Thuan Chi gradually became weak, vulnerable, and completely dependent on me. I gradually instilled the fear of betrayal, filling his head with the idea that Gia was not trustworthy and would abandon him at any time. Thuan Chi completely trusted me, constantly begging for help, but every promise was just a noose, tightening little by little. In the end, Thuan Chi was no longer sober enough to realize that he was being controlled. I gently caressed him, soothing the pain I caused, while silently pushing him into the abyss. But this plan failed when Thuan Chi changed his mind halfway. He met me and said I was wrong. "From now on I don't need anyone else, I just need you to be my companion like before, let's forget about family and start over, okay?" Haha, I didn't say anything, just looked at him with eyes that were both pitiful and contemptuous. What did he see me as? A substitute? I didn't want and didn't need such a lowly feeling. The candy that I treasured like a treasure was now rotten, but it still had to belong to me, not anyone else. As time passed, I often went to the suburbs, looking for remote places with no one passing by. Finally, I found an almost abandoned area, with a small, dilapidated grocery store. The store owner was an old man, gentle and kind. When I learned that he was about to move, I showed regret and started to chat more. By skillfully pushing the conversation, I made the owner feel like a father to this poor little girl. Before leaving, he also gave me many gifts, along with words of encouragement. "Don't worry, granddaughter. After these difficult days, your future will be better." I bowed my head in gratitude, tears welling up in my eyes, but my heart was cold. Such sympathetic words only made me feel that everything was funnier than ever. After saying goodbye to the grocery store owner, I glanced at the mirror. In the mirror, the girl was crying, her eyes were red and swollen, full of pity. But if I looked closely, those eyes were completely empty, without any emotion. Turning my back to the owner, I slightly curled my lips, giving a cold smile to my reflection. "That's good, everything is easier, no need to find another place. Save time and effort, that's good. Everything has been prepared. The area is deserted, the door is locked firmly, just need to create an opportunity to turn this place into a perfect crime scene. The plan is to lure Thuan Chi here first, then trick Gia in. The knife and other tools are also prepared. This will be the place where everything ends." But unexpectedly, at this moment, Thuan Chi has moved further away from Gia. How ridiculous. Now he realizes that the past is just nothing, but I don't allow myself to fail. The decisive moment has come. I take Thuan Chi to a small, dark and empty room. There is a shiny knife on the table. Gia is wearing white clothes, his hands are tied to the beam. Thuan Chi stands there, facing Gia, his eyes are dull and lost. I said softly, "It's beautiful, isn't it? Like a white swan, gliding gently on the lake." Those words, combined with the melody of Saint Saëns' swan that was ringing in the air, were like a final blow to Thuan Chi's mind. Unable to bear it any longer, Thuan Chi picked up the knife and walked towards Gia. Blood began to spread on the floor, blending with the soft melody of the music. Jia fell down, still trying to call for help, his eyes filled with panic as he looked at Thuong Chi. Why did you do that? But Thuong Chi seemed to no longer hear anything. He just stared at his bloody hands, his eyes were hazy. In a corner of the room, Jia weakly begged, but it seemed like no one responded. The room fell into silence, only the music echoed, beautiful but haunting. In the last moment, Jia's eyes were still fixed on Thuong Chi, as if wanting to say something. Thuong Chi froze, seemingly a little more awake. He staggered back, sat down on the ground, unable to believe what he had just done. Jia lay motionless. In the space, there was only the music echoing, repeating over and over like a fateful refrain. Outside, the light began to shine through the window, shining directly on Thuong Chi's lonely figure. A painful cry rang out. Thuong Chi panicked and threw the knife, hugging his head and cowering in the corner of the room, his whole body trembling. I slowly sat down, my eyes were a little hazy, a smile appeared on my lips, gentle and satisfied. That's right, you finally gave up. Thuong Chi began to return to his innocent appearance like before, just like the previous times I held him in my arms, caressing him to calm his emotions. I did wrong. I did something bad. Like a child, Thuong Chi pulled on my sleeve, his eyes filled with helplessness. I patted his head, gently saying, "It's okay, you did a good job." I gently squeezed Thuong Chi's mouth, stuffed a handful of pills in. "This is a reward, remember not to drop any pills." Thuong Chi tried hard to chew and swallow. I carefully wiped away the blood stains on the knife, fingerprints, shoe prints, and all the evidence. Of course, I intentionally left some vague traces, to make it difficult for the investigation. Meanwhile, Thuong Chi was still in a daze, carrying the bag I had prepared. I took him out of the apartment, away from the scene. Stepping out, Thuong Chi trembled, avoiding the blood on the floor, his whole body convulsing like a person who had lost his soul. I stood looking at him with a satisfied smile, then turned back and processed the remaining details. This letter was so detailed that it almost described the entire cause and method of the crime, but at the end, there was a line that was very blurry and could not be read clearly. After reading it, everyone fell into silence. A colleague broke the silence. That apartment was rented, the lock was broken. If the victim Jia struggled to get out and call for help, someone would probably find out, like the grocery store owner. The deputy captain rubbed his forehead and sighed. Instinctively, Jia should have tried to get out. But why didn't she do that, not even trying to call for help? Trin Lam closed his eyes and replied, "Maybe Jia has given up. Maybe she just called someone's name, hoping they would come back, or maybe she was too scared, trying to leave something as evidence." The colleague received a message via the walkie-talkie. "There are no suspicious traces in the vicinity, and nothing else has been detected in the building." Then, everyone turned their eyes to the last door that had not been checked. It was the last room in the apartment. Ling approached, took a deep breath, and boldly pushed the door open. The scene that appeared stunned everyone, a body lying motionless, eyes closed, no longer breathing, blood had stopped flowing. Yin lay there, cold, silent, as if everything had been predetermined long ago. A bottle of medicine fell to the ground, pills scattered everywhere. Suicide. The chrysanthemum necklace around her neck was pulled askew, now leaning to one side, as if it was whispering something. Blood was flowing everywhere. Ling's lips trembled. Before she could say anything, the deputy captain took the right to speak first. The deputy captain was surprised, his voice suddenly raised. "What's going on? This girl is also involved in drug trafficking? What are you still standing there for? Quickly report and investigate. You have to dig 3 feet of soil to find clues." Ling quickly grabbed the deputy captain to stop him. "Calm down a bit." Another colleague also tried to stop him. "Brother, this doesn't seem right. By the way, stop screaming, do you want to ruin the scene?" The last sentence made the deputy captain fall silent. The deputy captain stared at Jia's mouth, bending down to examine it more closely. The lips that were originally soft were now pale, lifeless, like a crushed flower bud. But inside, the petals were stained with blood. The deputy captain was silent, lightly touching her lips with his finger, feeling a bit After a few seconds, he turned to look at Qing Ling and his colleague, his face full of pain. Human bones. The colleague tried to probe, is it Gia's? The deputy captain struggled internally, scratching his head. First clean up the scene, then find a way to tactfully notify the family. What kind of tactful notification is this? The deputy captain did not answer, just kept silent. Qing Ling turned her face away, straining to suppress her nausea. Could this be the other kind of candy she had talked about? Qing Ling was in a state of emotional turmoil. All the thoughts in her head were like a tangled mess. The more she tried to untangle them, the tighter they became. Qing Ling said nothing, waiting for the forensic team to arrive, then quietly continued her work with her other colleagues. It was not until nightfall that she returned home, lying on the bed. The radio was broadcasting a storm warning. Before she could close the window, a strong wind came, picking up her forgotten resignation letter and smashing it to the floor. Qing Lin tried to close the window, then bent down to pick up the resignation letter lying on the floor, her eyes stopping at the handwritten lines. The words seemed to come to life, pulling her along, like piano keys hitting straight into her mind. Outside, the storm roared, the wind was like crazy drum beats, the out-of-time melodies wrapped around her. Qing Lin closed her eyes, feeling like she was being drawn into a whirlwind of sound. In the midst of the chaos, a voice rang out, both gentle and cold, "Officer Qing, do you hate me that much? Tell me, what will you do? What can you do?" Qing Lin asked herself, what should I choose? She suddenly opened her eyes, crumpled the resignation letter into a ball, and threw it straight into the trash can. A stream of thoughts passed. She used to be someone who searched for a gap in the wall. But now, the window was slightly open, a gentle wind blew in, causing the curtain to sway slightly. It was as if she had seen a glimmer of light in the abyss. Finally, she had overcome it. She placed her hand on the tool bag, feeling the beat of responsibility. Qing Ling doesn't believe in eternity, but she understands why she stays. She doesn't run away. No one can run away forever. If you don't fight, there will only be collapse. Fighting is the only way to move forward. As long as you can endure the bone-chilling cold, as long as you keep going, you will regain the light yourself. Only rely on yourself. As long as you overcome, you can use a little light to illuminate those who are lost. No matter what the reason, committing a crime is still unforgivable. But if it has happened, the future can still be changed from the present. It's no longer the present that is more painful. Qing Ling believes that, despite her fatigue, she still has a lot to do. From then on, no matter how much she faced indifference, ridicule, or oppression, she would never waver or give up. She always reminded herself, only change can lead to reform. Any problem can be solved, as long as the lifespan is longer than the problem. She understood that nothing is forever. There is no stability that can forever block those who want to change. Unless you dare to destroy it, to open a new path. Trin Lam knew that she had to both break down the obstacles and stand firm to protect what she believed in. She was the only female police officer in the criminal investigation team, but that did not mean she was alone. She believed that one day, more girls would join the team. And she would be the first to pave the way for them. When the young girls who were still confused entered this field, she would use her experience to help them overcome unreasonable contempt and baseless rules. The obstacles have been cleared, they can freely explore, and then it will be their turn to support the next generation. Trin Lin is steadfast in her ideals, and reality has proven that her steadfastness was not in vain. In just a few years, technology has developed rapidly. Surveillance cameras are everywhere, even crime methods have changed and become more sophisticated. Traditional media has declined, online platforms have risen strongly. What was once considered immutable has disappeared under the pressure of the digital age. The missing person and murder case of Jia, compared to other major cases, is now just an ordinary case. No one pays attention to it anymore. Trin Lin once tried searching online, but only found a few short lines, not even a single photo. With the development of technology, communication has become more transparent and direct. Many issues that were once hidden have now been exposed on social media, including the issue of women still being overlooked in some police units. But through strong reforms, Trin Lin has witnessed the emergence of a new era. Through her participation in many cases, along with her excellence in work, she has proven her ability to overcome old prejudices. The criticisms of the past, such as women are too emotional, not suitable for leadership, or women should take care of their families, don't work too hard, have now become compliments and recognition. Now, no one in the team dares to say that women are not suitable for criminal investigation or leadership positions. Trin Lin is living proof. With the appearance of many other female colleagues, she and them created a larger space. Now, everyone calls her Deputy Captain Trin. Chapter 9. Trin Lin flipped through the documents on the bookshelf, her eyes stopping at a corner of an old newspaper. Just a few random lines about her childhood. She was silent for a long time, recalling the first days of entering the industry, facing countless challenges. She once thought, if she had been guided in the right direction, could things have been different? Trin Lin had handled many more cruel cases, but for some reason, the cold eyes of the little girl in the old case still haunted her. That case had ended. No matter how many times she assumed, the crime could not be justified. But now, she always asked herself, what more could I do? On a rare day off, Qingling divided her personal finances, sending a portion to the children's charities her younger sister was participating in. Sister? What are you going to do? Didn't you talk about donating last time? Tell your colleagues to donate a portion too, and then send it to their organization's account. The younger sister was surprised. You're so busy, but you still remember this. Qingling just touching the plastic cover of the document. In a training course on criminal investigation, Qingling used her family's disappearance as an example. Always talk to children, pay attention to their behavior. If there are unusual signs such as violence or abuse, immediately seek police help. Don't leave them alone. In addition to children, we also need to invest in building a team of teachers. Is there a policy to support teachers? Where are the funding sources? Not only do we need to fill our stomachs, but education must also be guaranteed. The younger sister could only bow her head in admiration. What's wrong with you? Normally, you would say something unpleasant, but today you're talking non-stop about charity. Trin Lin smiled, not answering. She just silently recalled the girl's eyes, thinking about the so-called eternity, change, and the passage of time. She whispered, let's save the children. Don't let them be held back by a distorted society, but give them a bright future. In addition to children, we also need to invest in building a team of teachers. Is there a policy to support teachers? Where are the funding sources? Not only do we need to fill our stomachs, but education must also be guaranteed. The younger sister could only bow her head in admiration. What's wrong with you? Normally, you would say something unpleasant, but today you're talking non-stop about charity. Trin Lin smiled, not answering. She just silently recalled the girl's eyes, thinking about the so-called eternity, change, and the passage of time. She whispered, let's save the children. Don't let them be held back by a distorted society, but give them a bright future.